think at last we spoke about the concept of co-op. And at that point in time, I was dealing in agricultural curriculum and had developed in school aquaponic program at a quote unquote alternative school on the south side of Chicago. And from there, was looking really to partner with individuals that were looking to address the, what do they call it? The food desert. And of course, I'm somewhat at that point in time, I had met Webb Evans and had did some work for him as it relates to a website when he first established the website. And of course, I respect his legacy. And so that when Ellis communicated the idea that you and he at least were talking about a market and that the base of it would be cooperative style, then I wanted to, as much as possible, tie into that. Well, I think we're at a place where, as the concept is developing, one of the things that I did not want to do was impose what I had in its totality, and therefore not leave room open to hear the ideas of others. I think you pretty much, in a very short way, communicated some of the steps and the processes. I think at the same time, so there's a real big picture. So I think we should zero in on who are going to be the collaborators, where are our targets coming from, and establishing relationships with those targets. It requires work. One of the things that I'm very clear on at this point in time is that, we have the historical experience that we have. And most individuals are under the impression that when you go to establish something, it's like going to order something from Burger King, that it should occur quick, fast, and in a hurry. And that when individuals find that that is not the case, they go to start cutting corners. And you can't cut corners and get what is needed. It's meant to go through step one, two, and three. You can't start, dissecting that. So it requires commitment. And sometimes we don't want to commit to the right thing for the long term in an honest way. And we'll have to deal with that. And I think that's why it's very important to have that academic aspect, because you'll technically have to reorient the young people as it relates to the value system that's necessary to work as a team, to reorient their understanding that the purpose of getting education is to develop and repair your community specifically, and then the world. So it's because where we are and what it requires for us to engage in this way really does require commitment and sacrifice. We've gotten to a place we don't want to sacrifice anymore. Hmm. Hmm. So somewhere they've gotten the communication via all of the social conversation that life shouldn't be hard. Like you shouldn't have to suffer or go without. Sure, you will have to. Sure, you will have to. That's called life, the up and down. Without the up and down straight line, one way, that's called a flat line. You would not be living. So you're going to have those ups and downs. That's called life. But they've been communicated as if no, it's supposed to be high fiving and partying and relaxing when you're not partying, and that's it. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I think this is the perfect focus, simply because the communication has always been, if you really want to get people to sit down and talk to you, it should be over food. And so that to get them to be part of growing the food, we can have that conversation with them. And so I think, again, just even the style of which we set the structure up to convey the information is more so conversational style, and that addresses the disconnect between the generations. So the way that we're constructing it is really to get back to something that we've lost along the way in our effort to integrate into a construct that is still bent on keeping us out, with the majority of us acting as if that's not the case. So it's what we're talking about doing is really uniquely different, in the sense that we have to go back and really incorporate how we did it in Oklahoma, because we've done it here. It's just that's the part of history that's not taught. And so for us to introduce that part of history, we are giving them a blueprint. At this point in time, they get no blueprints in the academic setting. That's when they get out. That's why when they get out into the community, they kind of try to construct their own blueprint of how they're going to make it, because they're not getting in the educational system blueprints for that. And because we're not properly analyzing or critiquing the educational system, we have not identified that to be the case. So we want to argue over test scores. And that's not the issue. The issue is the content. But then if you look at the picture broadly and look at the fact and deal with the reality that we're still fighting for our identity and our dignity and our ability to direct our path, and that's not something that an institution gives you unless you built that institution to do so. So So there's a lot of work and a lot of truth telling that has got to occur, and people have gotten very comfortable because they're paid not to tell the truth or to deal with it. So youth don't have aspect or they don't have the advantage of that. And we've got to give that back to them. So what we're doing is on every front. We're dealing with education. Dealing with economics. We're dealing with health. We're talking about putting the community back together, therefore creating an institution that is focused on preparing individuals to do just that, because that's the function and the purpose of that institution. So it's an institutional failure that we have to deal with. It's not a student failure, it's an institutional failure. And so therefore we have to create institutions and prepare individuals in that institution to go out and repair the communities, to do what it is that they're supposed to be trained to do, or else don't go get the training. It's a waste of your time. At the same time, I think it's very important to acknowledge individuals who have not necessarily made history books like Evans. So somehow tie that into, because we're writing history, and at this point in time, you're writing history in Chicago. So I think it's great for us to use those who have walked ahead of us 50, 60, 70 years ago. But at the same time, you have to incorporate those that are modern. Why? Because again, our goal is to teach young people that we are writing history every day of our lives, and that they have a responsibility to write history as well. So therefore be cognizant of what it is that they're doing and the impact it has on our community and the world, because it's truly a stage and they are performing, and at this point in time, poorly. So again, I think to continue the legacy of Evans, because that's initially what brings us together, and at the same time to acknowledge, and we've gotten to the point where we don't like to address how we should be acknowledged, but to even value yourselves and the work that you have committed to it is necessary. Is necessary. So there's a lot that we have to reorient ourselves in regards to. And I think, again, to be mindful of the fact that you have already, to a certain extent, written history. It's just, it's not published yet. And so, therefore, again, this institution and this model is about incorporating all of that. So, your footsteps, too, just like Evans, just like Washington, and just like their footsteps, must be accounted for. That's what this is about. This isn't just about acknowledging others and then you go unwritten, unseen, unheard of. That's not how it's done. You're not a slave building a pyramid, and I'm not convinced slaves built the pyramid. But my point is, for that which you understand that you are being judged by, you have a different response as it relates to your commitment to. So this is about your legacy as well. And so then for that reason, somehow your names have to be in it as well. And that's something that's been stripped of us. So we continue to work as if, we don't count, that we're invisible, and that there's some martyr that we're working to maintain the image of. No, that's not what this is about. This is about showing you lived, and this is what you did when you lived, and this is the mark that you left for others to follow. You did, and that's one of the reasons why I felt that we had to come together and do something and do this, because another part of the institution development is the conflict resolution curriculum, and that's dedicated to Knox, and that's dedicated to the work that Knox did. And so when we talk about going on, what drives the two of you is what drives the two of you, including the persons that have influenced you and you have influenced. What drives me is Knox, the influence I've had on him, the influence he has had on me, plus the others that we mentioned. And so all of that has to be incorporated. Knox's name is going to be on something. Evan's name is going to be on something, but so should your name. Do you understand? Because this is about passing something on. And for that reason, you have to be mentioned because you have granddaughters, grandsons, and people that you have met and touched, and they will come to know this is a life that you live. So then they begin to look at their life and how they're living it differently. That's what this is about. It is to get us to realize that's what living is about because we've been disconnected from that. So that's why we got to do it too. We've already crossed paths in so many ways already. And so now this is about being cognizant of the fact that we've crossed paths and doing something with it constructive and in a controlled manner. Because that's what quote unquote human beings are supposed to be doing. And that's what we're not doing, but we understand our history and we understand what oppresses us to the point that we're not doing it. So when what we're talking about doing is, like I said, it's very deep and it's very broad. But every opportunity that we have to convey to others what it's about, it will get out the depth of it and the broadness of it because everything we do is always deep. We're the builders of civilization that they cannot take away. And that is still part of how we do what we do.